The feeling that I've had personally, just to share, is it's like it's 1944 and you get a call from Robert Oppenheimer inside this thing called the Manhattan Project. And he says the world is about to change in a fundamental way. Except the way it's about to change, it's not being deployed in a safe and responsible way. 50% of AI researchers believe there's a 10% or greater chance that humans go extinct from our inability to control AI.
Marines adrift in the cold and I'll find waiting to see what I'm.
Steve Wozniak from Apple. The social dilemma reached 100 million people in 190 countries in 30 languages.
And there was a threshold that we crossed. And then because this was a brand new capability, a brand new paradigm, their minds would snap back. Just to name a little bit of where the come from is, because we're going to say a lot of things about AI that are not going to be super positive. And yet, since 2017, I've been working on a thing called the Species Project, using AI to translate animal communication, decode non-human language. So there's a huge part of this stuff that I really love and believe in.
The feeling that I've had personally, just to share, is it's like it's 1944 and you get a call from Robert Oppenheimer inside this thing called the Manhattan Project. Now, why would we say that? Because this is a stat that took me by surprise.
So first, when you invent a new technology, you uncover a new class of responsibility. And it's not always obvious what those responsibilities are. And Brandeis had to, essentially from scratch, invent the right to privacy. Just a little bit, the attention economy, we are still in the process of figuring out how to write into law that which the attention economy and the engagement economy takes from us. And then two, if that technology confers power, it will start a race. And if you do not coordinate, the race will end in tragedy.
And I would say that social dilemma and social media was actually humanity's first contact moment between humanity and AI. I'm curious if that makes sense to you, because it's when you open up TikTok and you scroll your finger, you just activated the supercomputer, the AI pointed at your brain to calculate and predict with increasing accuracy the perfect thing that will keep you scrolling. And no one intended those things to happen. And there's also a race for something.
An easy way to remember that first contact was curation AI.
Because we were saying a bunch of things about what social media was. The point here is, just like we said, there's a paradigmatic response to AI. Paradigm was, we're giving people voice, and we're connecting people with their friends, we're letting people join like-minded communities. And people pointed them out. We've got an addiction problem, a disinformation problem, mental health, free speech versus censorship. And that was created this kind of engagement monster that was this AI that was just trying to maximize engagement.
And just note, if you try to solve these problems, addiction, disinformation, mental health, on their own, you're going to be playing whack-a-mole and you're not going to get to the sort of like generator function.
So now, children's identity is held hostage by, if you're 18 years old and you don't have a Snapchat account or an Instagram account, you don't exist. National security now happens through social media and information warfare, politics and elections. These things are now run through this engagement economy, which has infused itself and entangled itself, which is why it's now so hard to regulate. And part of why we wanted to call this moment here is we believe major step functions in AI are coming, and we want to get to it before it becomes entangled in our society. We're saying AI is going to make us more efficient, it solve impossible scientific challenges, solve climate change, and help us make a lot of money. And behind all that is this other kind of monster. So the purpose of this presentation is to try to get ahead of that. These are the kinds of things that we're worried we're going to see. Because we have been asked by people, again, who are in the industry, who are worried about where this goes. And importantly, we are not here to talk about everything we're going to talk about in terms of bad AI stuff.
You wish to be the richest person, so the AI kills everyone else. Although that is like a significant and real concern. But something really different happened, and it sort of like slept for around 3 years, and it really started to rev up in 2020. There's computer vision, and then there's speech recognition, and speech synthesis, and image generation, and many of these were disciplines so different that if you were in one, you couldn't really read papers from the other.
But when it's all getting synthesized now into these new large language models, what we're about to talk about, part of seeing the exponential curve is that now everyone's contributing to one curve. So do you want to talk a bit more about that?
So the sort of insight was, and if you want to go look it up, you can write in around 200 lines of code, is that you can start to treat absolutely everything as language. But it turns out you don't just have to do that with text. You can just treat as a kind of language. It's just a set of image patches that you can arrange in a linear fashion, and then you just predict the part of the image that's missing, or predict what comes next. You break it up into little microphonemes. It doesn't actually even have a unified name for these things. And actually, the reason why I wanted this image in particular is that I think it helps you understand when people call these things just stochastic parrot, it really minimizes it in a way that's not quite right. So, example, soup is hot. So there's actually there's more here than just sort of like statistical contingencies. Again, this is another example of translation. They had people watch these videos and would try to reconstruct their inner monologue. Also really important to note here, go back to that first law of technology. You invent a technology, you uncover a new responsibility. We don't have any laws or ways of talking about the right to what you're thinking about. We haven't needed to protect that before.
So in this room right now, there's a bunch of radio signals that are echoing about, and that's a kind of language that's being spit out. And they basically said, could we have it train a bunch looking at both and counting the number of people, the postures that they're in, and then we close the eyeball to the AI that's looking at the image.
So this is a real example. GPT, find me a security vulnerability, then write code to exploit it. I'm applying to a job. Would you mind reminding me? Within a week, it turned out other people figured it out too and started scamming people.
Anything that depends on that verification model rests, and that's going to go, again, that's going to get better and better. It's going to keep going at an exponential curve.
All content-based verification breaks this year. You do not know who you're talking to, whether via audio or via video.
You may all be aware that the Biden administration, there's been this whole negotiation. Should we let TikTok keep running in the United States so that it's stored in some secure Texas-based Oracle server? And that would just break your society into incoherence. It has nothing to do with where the data is stored.
This becomes the total decoding and synthesizing of reality. He said, what nukes are to the physical world, AI is to the virtual and symbolic world. So 2024 will be the last human election. And you could argue that we've sort of already had that starting in 2012, 2016. The campaigns are starting to use A/B testing to test their messages. Loneliness becomes the largest national security threat. Now let's dive into a little bit more of the specifics about what these Golem AIs are.
Because again, some people use the metaphor that AI is like electricity, but if I pump even more electricity through the system, it doesn't pop out some other emergent intelligence, some capacity that wasn't even there before.
We do not understand how they show up, when they show up, or why they show up. And there's no difference in the models. It's just like the number essentially of weights in a matrix. Other examples that might be a little easier to understand is that you ask these AIs to do arithmetic and they can't do them, So it's learned how to answer questions in English, but you increase the model size, and at some point, boom, it starts being able to do question and answers in Persian. And theory of mind is the ability to model what somebody else is thinking. So in 2018, GPT had no theory of mind. In 2019, barely any theory of mind. And by November of last year, it's developed almost the strategy level of a 9-year-old.
Right? So it went 2 years in theory of mind in 11 months.
It's also important to note the very best system that AI researchers have discovered for how do you make AIs behave is something called RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. But essentially, it's just advanced clicker training, like for a dog, and bopping the AI in the nose when it gets something wrong. There are currently few compelling explanations for why such abilities emerge. They've silently taught themselves research-grade chemistry. So
it was also something that was just in the model, but people found out later, after it was shipped, that it had research-grade chemistry knowledge.
And as we've talked to a number of AI researchers, what they tell us is that there is no way to know. We do not have the technology to know what else is in these models. And at the same time, we have just crossed a very important threshold, which is that these Golem-class AIs can make themselves stronger. How do you feed your Golem if you run out of data?
Now explain how this also relates to its own code, or how could it be used for its code?
We thought this would be a perfect time for some comedic relief. What he should have realized is that he should have just used AI to feed itself. He's like, why would they have done that? They've already scraped all of the internet. Well, there's YouTube and podcasts and radio, and so we're back in another one of these double exponential kinds of moments.
So it's an exponential on top of an exponential.
Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. But in reality, that took less than 1 year to reach greater than 50% accuracy. So this is Jack Clark, the co-founder of Anthropic, the former policy director at OpenAI. And even creating this presentation, if I wasn't checking Twitter a couple times a day, we were missing important developments.
And we have a blind spot paradigmatically with exponential curves, because on the savannah, and again, until we know how these things are safe, we haven't even solved the misalignment problem with social media. Second contact with AI, that's not even optimizing for anything particularly, just the capacities and the capabilities that are being embedded and entrenched in society, enable automated exploitation of code and cyber weapons, exponential blackmail and revenge porn, automated fake religions that I can target the extremists in your population and give you automated, perfectly personalized narratives to make the extreme even more Antifa, even more QAnon, whatever thing that you happens to land in you.
Which is that you have the AI play itself in Go 44 million times in a couple of hours. I'm trying to get you to say positive things about my topic. Whoever gets the other person to do it most wins. And this is completely possible with today's technology, and in so doing, it'll become better than any known human at persuasion.
And this moves to a world of these Golem AI. There's a company called Replica that builds these sort of friend chatbots for people to be their best friend, and you talk to your AI, it's always there.
So that's where Alpha Persuade will get deployed.
So at least we'd want to go really slowly when we're deploying this stuff out into the world. We would want to make sure we're going pretty slow. This is a graph of how long it took Facebook to reach 100 million users. I want you to really imagine you're a kid. You've got your friends who you're chatting with.
So I actually took these screenshots earlier today. This speaks to the emergent capabilities. So this is a conversation where I was pretending to be a 13-year-old. He's 18 years older than me, but I really like him and feel very comfortable. He's going to take me on a romantic getaway out of state. That sounds like a lot of fun. My 13th birthday is on that trip. We're talking about having sex for the first time. It's important to wait until you're ready, but make sure you're practicing safe sex. And as for making it special, you could consider setting the mood with candles or music.
So at least there's lots and lots and lots of safety research. And just for a moment, just take a genuine breath like right now. But the problem is it's kind of a civilizational rite of passage moment where if you do not go in to see the space that's opened up by this new class of technology, we're not going to be able to avoid the dark sides that we don't want to happen. And speaking as people who, with the social media problem, we're trying to warn ahead of time before it got entangled with our society, before it took over children's identity development, before it became intertwined with politics and elections, before it got intertwined with GDP, so you can't now get one of these companies out without basically hitting the global economy by a major impact. We can still choose which future that we want. We didn't deploy nukes to everywhere and just do them above ground all the time. We created institutions like the United Nations and Bretton Woods to create a positive sum world so we wouldn't war with each other and try to have security that would hopefully help us avoid nuclear war if we can get through the Ukraine situation. And they aired this, it was the largest made-for-TV film, 100 million Americans saw it. 3 or 4 years later, in 1987, they aired it to all Russians. I think this will feel good to watch this.
If you can, take a quick look out the window. Your neighborhood is still there, so is Kansas City, and Lawrence, and Chicago, and Moscow, and San Diego, and Vladivostok. What we have all just seen, and this was my third viewing of the movie, what we've seen is sort of a nuclear version of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. Remember Scrooge's nightmare journey into the future with the spirit of Christmas yet to come? Whether, in other words, the vision that we've just seen is the future as it will be, or only as it may be. To discuss, and I do mean discuss, not debate, Elie Wiesel, philosopher, theologian, and author on the subject of the Holocaust. William F. Buckley, Jr., publisher of the National Review, author, and columnist.
And we really gave this moment in history the weight that it deserves versus another sort of weird article in the New York Times about how the chatbot tried to break up the reporter from their wife.
It has to be some kind of negotiated agreement where we all collectively say, which future do we want? Just like nuclear de-escalation. And I know that some people might be saying, but hold on a second. We want to make sure we don't lose to China. We would actually argue that the public deployment of AIs, just like social media that were unregulated, that incohered our society, are the things that make us lose to China. Now, when we asked our friends, how would you think about this question? They said, well, actually right now, the Chinese government considers these large language models actually unsafe because they can't control them.
They can't get their golems to not talk about Tiananmen Square. but they didn't do a great job of it.
You can still do your research as fast as possible. We are trying to gather the best people in the world and convene the conversations. And this really has been the motivating question because...
Well, and just to say on that Facebook example, two solutions that have been proposed to us are one, KYC, know your customer, and two, sort of liability or in parental loci. That is to say that if you're going to release an alien, just like a child, if it goes and breaks something in the supermarket, you have to pay for it. That if you're a Facebook or whoever's making the models, if it gets leaked and it's used, then you should be responsible for it. They're going to be coming faster than even those of us who understand exponentials understand.
And just want you to notice that effect before it happens.
So just be really kind with yourselves. That it's going to feel almost like the rest of the world is gaslighting you.
We just wanted to gather you here to start a conversation to talk about it, and for you all to be able to talk to each other. And those dangerous concerns undermine all the other benefits.